Americans for decades. We're going to unleash the fury and might of the United States against these cartels.
Politicians are calling for war on cartels.
Is the United States federal government going to control our southern border, or are we going to let the Mexican drug cartels do it?
To combat the crises at America's southern border.
Tonight, the country is bracing for a migration influx.
Stop this illicit drug trafficking. It's killing Americans everywhere in this country.
This has been a major bipartisan failure of the United States government for many decades now. There is no accountability.
But an unprecedented intelligence project reveals.
Like, who knows about this? He's like, I've told everybody. I go, CIA? He goes, yeah. I go, FBI? I go, yeah. I go, DEA? I go, yeah.
The front line of this battle is where we least expect.
Just pulled out a 9mm wrapped in plastic, which is still dripping in gasoline here, out of the gas tank. It's got this AR-15 that was hidden in this rear seat.
We have allowed the cartels to amass an army.
Please.
As usual. Name of the game, right?
Yes. Wait.
So where are we going?
We are going to meet with some gang members, and they're going to show us how they smuggle all these type of weapons from the U.S. into Mexico.
These guys are sort of a part of a network that supplies guns to the cartel.
Yes. These guns that we're going to see, these guns are going to kill people.
Miguel Angel Vega is a journalist who was born and raised in the heart of cartel territory. We hired him to help us gain access to gun trafficking operations from the U.S. into Mexico.
This could be any town, USA.
Could be anywhere.
We're on the trail of gun runners crisscrossing the American West. The path was leading south across the border.
Even though there's a long, long line of cars trying to get into Mexico, the checks have got to be very, very rudimentary at best because we've pretty much been consistently moving. We're stopped here, photographed, and that's it. I've not seen a single vehicle stopped and pulled over. So we just received a pin drop from one of our contacts.
We're not going to any touristic destination here.
Right.
We're going to Cartel land.
This feels really sketch. We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
Mexico has incredibly strict gun laws, making it next to impossible for civilians to buy firearms. Only one gun store exists for the entire country, and it's on a military base. To get firearms, criminals have to smuggle them in.
Oh, wow. Just pulled out a 9mm wrapped in plastic out of the gas tank. It's got this AR-15 that was hidden in this rear seat. He can hide guns in the door panels, in the tires. The smuggler said that he can hide upwards of 30+ guns at any given time in a small sedan like this, effectively a mule for these weapons going into Mexico. This is crazy. How much do you make when you do this?
$5,000.
$5,000 for one crossing.
Muy fácil. Todos easy. Muy fácil de comprar.
Very easy to get these arms in America. Are you a U.S. citizen or a Mexican citizen? Both. The U.S. announced recently that it was cracking down on gun trafficking from the U.S. into Mexico. Are you at all afraid of what the U.S. government might do and what kind of an impact that might have on your business?
No.
No, you're not afraid?
No.
So nothing has changed?
Pues, no sé, normal.
Two cartels control the vast majority of gun and drug trafficking in and out of the U.S. Jalisco New Generation, better known by its acronym CJNG, and Sinaloa. Despite high-profile arrests, their smuggling operations have been growing. A CBS Reports investigation found that Americans have been aiding narcos to smuggle military-grade weapons out of the U.S. into Mexico. at a scale and sophistication unknown to the American public. This story is based on exclusively obtained government documents and interviews with half a dozen current and former officials with direct knowledge, as well as senior members of the Sinaloa cartel.
So we are arming the cartels.
100%. No doubt about it. I worked for ATF for approximately 25 years. I worked street guns and drug crime.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your role, particularly around trafficking of guns?
Towards the end of my career, I had an excellent opportunity to work in a really unique place.
Chris Demline was assigned to the Drug Enforcement Administration's intelligence hub in Washington, D.C., known as Special Operations Division.
I had an intel analyst come to me one day who had specialized in the cartels for years. And he said to me, hey, I've got some stuff you may want to see. It was instantly apparent that the cartels had large-scale covert weapons trafficking networks all across the U.S., from coast to coast, from north to south, and that they were funneling thousands of guns into Mexico to fuel the drug war. I asked him, I said, who's doing something about this? And he said, nobody. I was like, holy crap. Like, are you serious? He's like, yeah. I'm like, dude, who knows about this? He's like, I've told everybody. I go, CIA? He goes, yeah. I go, FBI? I go, yeah. I go, DEA? I go, yeah. They all tell me it's a gun problem, and that would fall with ATF. And I went, well, you want to do something about it? And he was like, yeah.
That something became the first U.S. intelligence project focused on international gun trafficking, launched in 2018. Until then, law enforcement had been conducting operations mostly focused on busting individual, low-level gun runners. Instead, this new mission would attempt to identify and take down entire smuggling networks.
Whether they were Democrat, whether they were Republican, they were pro-gun, they were anti-gun, everybody came together to focus on the problem for the good of the nation.
They called it Thor. The full scope of the project and its operations have never been reported until now.
Why are you talking about Project Thor now?
This is the story the American people need to know.
What are we looking at here?
This is the creation of intelligence data from all over the United States.
Can we see how and where one of the major cartels is able to procure its weapons? Essentially, these are like hubs.
So you think of terrorist cells, these are like individual cells.
Okay.
In a matter of months, Project Thor discovered dozens of cartel gun-running networks. This is just one example of how the CJ&G cartel had been trafficking firearms. Law enforcement had missed them for years.
The cartels have their fingers across the country, and they're able to pull firearms from all over the country, and they do.
Here's how it works. When narcos want guns, they activate a phone tree, calling accomplices who live across the U.S.
This is not a southwest border issue. We've got Wisconsin, we've got Portland up here, a Racine up there, right?
This exclusively obtained intelligence map shows where this is happening. Every pinpoint is a gun purchase traced directly to cartel violence. Thor tracked buyers as far north as Maine and even Alaska.
Men and women that were U.S. citizens, right, and didn't have a criminal history and could purchase guns.
These people are paid to buy weapons and ammo, then illegally pass them off to brokers. Couriers pick up those guns and drive them across the southwest border into Mexico and into the hands of cartels. Prior to Project Thor, the ATF concluded that the timeline from purchase in the U.S. to use in a violent crime in Mexico was more than 1 year. But Project Thor tracked orders from a purchase to an assassination attempt in less than 1 month.
Project Thor wasn't just about, hey, we have this problem, but we came up with a solution.
In 2022, the U.S. Department of Justice announced the sentencing of an Oklahoma man Project Thor discovered was providing arms to cartels.
This case that you'll hear about today is part of Operation Thor.
This case was the first Mexican cartel firearm parts exportation and manufacturing case to be indicted in the United States.
Demline and his team connected hundreds of investigations across 4 different law enforcement agencies. Thor helped solve those cases, put American accomplices in prison, and track down the narcos in charge so they could cut off entire supply chains. They were quietly awarded the Distinguished Service Medal in 2021.
Not only did they advance this new mission outside of their regular duties, but they also continued to push and transform the ATF culture into one that is intelligence-led. Extremely well done job.
We're talking about Thor in the past tense. Is Thor gone?
Thor, as our project, is gone. It's no more. I was told priorities in the U.S. government shifted. The money was gone.
In response to CBS Report's investigative findings, the Department of Justice and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms acknowledged that American gun-running networks are the primary supplier of military-grade weapons to Mexican drug cartels. But senior justice officials said they were not familiar with Project Thor.
The truth is, the U.S. was turning a blind eye to the flow of weapons illegally into Mexico. That is outrageous.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
You are correct. You are correct. This has been a major bipartisan failure of the United States government for many decades now. You wouldn't believe when I was raising this issue, there were people in the government who said, no, they're not really military weapons that go to Mexico. It's just handguns. But then to me, you're missing the point if they're purchasing, serious killing power.
They're seeking a level of weaponry that outguns Mexican law enforcement authorities. We see machine guns, like the M134 minigun kit, for instance, which is used by the American military and is capable of shooting 2,000 to 4,000 rounds per minute.
Increasingly, people buy military-grade weapons online. Some websites function like DoorDash for guns. People can order for pickup or delivery.
This gun is perfect for shooting targets or defending yourself against other attackers. It's also perfect for hunting game. When I put a 50 cal machine gun into my cart, and then I could dismount it. And so, it's just a few clicks. A lot easier than I expected.
It is easier to buy guns in America than almost anywhere else in the world, thanks to its unique constitutional right to bear arms. And cartels take advantage of that freedom.
This has nothing to do with our Second Amendment rights. I mean, I'm a constitutional lawyer. There's no conceivable Second Amendment right to send weapons out of the United States to countries where they are illegal. And in fact, send weapons out of the United States to countries where they are illegal. And in fact, violating United States export control law in the process.
Demline agreed to demonstrate some of the firepower cartels have been getting their hands on to understand what Mexican law enforcement is up against.
Going on! Ready?
That was a Barrett 50 caliber rifle, just one example of the type of firearm that Project Thor traced directly from Mexican cartels back to purchases in the U.S.
This is, in fact, a weapon that is in the hands of the cartel, bought somewhere in an American store.
Yes.
And the cartels have deployed these against the Mexican military.
Oh, yeah. They're fighting it back with your .223 5.56 round. But
so this is the cartels. That's the Mexican military.
That's what you got, yeah.
Wow. Not quite symmetrical here.
A little disparate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These firearms could be equipped with armor-piercing rounds, capable of lethal force from more than a mile away. For this demonstration, Demline placed a reinforced target 100 yards away.
Okay, let's go see what we did. It looks like we hit dead center. Went through this, armor plating, a body, and another cinder block wall. So through the building, through armor, through a body, and out the other side of the building. They're tearing them apart. Tearing them apart.
We're going to unleash the fury and might of the United States against these cartels.
A growing chorus of political leaders have been sounding the alarm, pushing to designate cartels terrorists, deploy the military, and declare war. But Mexico is a U.S. ally, and its government decries any potential use of American military force as a violation of its national sovereignty. We traveled to a narco stronghold just over the southwest border with Arizona to find out how cartels would react if the U.S. attacked. This man says he's a lieutenant in the Sinaloa cartel. he wouldn't reveal his identity as a condition of speaking publicly. Would the cartels respond if the U.S. military struck?
Llega otra persona que quiere quitar una propiedad, pues va a pelear. O sea, de que van a pelear, van a pelear.
So the guns are a way to protect business interests?
Pues sí, las usan como para protección, para defenderse, pues.
Do you fear for your life?
Pues sí. Pues la cárcel o la muerte. Son las únicas salidas. Pero un Dios de que, pues sí, lo logre y que salga con vida de estos dos.
Have we learned nothing from Afghanistan, Iraq? We are going to get caught in a quicksand if we go into Mexico that will make Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan look like a tea party. Certainly seems to me, as somebody who was U.S. ambassador to Mexico, that is the very last alternative you consider once you have exhausted every other alternative.
It's like strategy 101. If we were supplying ISIS with bombs, the first thing we would do is say, in America, we're stopping supplying ISIS with bombs.
In the spring of 2023, the Biden administration announced it was making it a top priority to stop cartel smuggling operations.
We are sending dangerous weapons, particularly assault weapons, to Mexico. To Mexico. They're asking us, please stop it. Cut it off at the border. What in God's name are we becoming if we don't do this?
The government focused on gun seizures at the border, as well as diplomatic negotiations to train and equip Mexican law enforcement.
Nearly 2,000 firearms were seized from last October to just this past March. That's a more than 65% increase over the same period last year.
According to the Mexican government, that number, 2,000 guns, is how much the cartels smuggle in a single day. Troy Miller is in charge of America's border agency.
As we sit here, hundreds of guns, thousands of guns are going from the U.S. into Mexico on a daily basis. What are we doing about the guns flowing into the hands of the cartels?
We've been pulsing and surging operations along the southwest border to look for weapons and then increase our information sharing with our partners in Mexico.
I could drive across the border with guns in my car. And the chances are I'm going to be successful. Isn't it incumbent upon CBP to be checking to make sure that weapons are not crossing into Mexico?
It's joint responsibility. You know, we are also responsible for checking everything that's coming into the country.
But as somebody who drove back and forth multiple times, no one looked.
We're working on these issues very closely with our Mexican partners, and we can do better every day.
When I was in Mexico, I would have meetings with the Mexican government about gun issues. And, you know, my staff would prepare for me a list of bullet points to raise at the meeting. I said, well, I want to see the bullet points prepared for the last ambassador and the ambassador before that. And guess what? They were the same bullet points. We've been talking about this for 10, 20 years. Nothing is changing, right? I don't think that's acceptable.
The murder rate in Mexico has gone up sixfold, 600%. And it's not because of anything but really the cartels and their ability to access firearms. We're basically just turning a blind eye to that.
You have people who are trying to flee the country because of insecurity and violence.
100%. If that was the murder rate in my country, I'd be trying to get the heck out as well with my family. They own the country. Nobody is going to bring any of them to justice, even if they can figure out who did it, right?
Oye, ¿ya se acabó el chorizo? Voy a la dirección que me enviaste.
So what do we know?
Someone was shot to death.
We're in Culiacan, Mexico, ground zero for the Sinaloa cartel.
No, this
So we've just come to the scene of a homicide. All we really know at this point is that one person was shot and killed in a pretty quiet residential area just off a main thoroughfare here.
Project Thor discovered that as much as 85% of cartel firearms found at crime scenes trace back to the U.S.
How often is it that the cartels are linked to this kind of violence?
Often, very often. I would dare to say all the time. Buenas tardes. You see that car?
Yeah.
That's the victim's car.
Is there much of an investigation that happens here?
No, I think Culiacan cartel-related murders, they are like in complete impunity.
Now, is that because they're powerful? Is that because they have bought off police?
Because they are powerful and because they are in the payroll of the cartel. I don't want to say all of them, but generally speaking, that's the case.
That's how powerful the cartels are.
Gun violence in Mexico has been getting worse. Firearms are responsible for 7 out of every 10 homicides. That's hundreds of thousands of people killed with American weapons. In fact, more civilians were killed over the last 15 years in the war on drugs here than the entire wars on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan combined.
We're having zero impact, and you can see our strategy as the United States is completely ineffective. We need to do something else. We have not done that in federal law enforcement. The United States is basically allowing those guns to flow to Mexico, to fight the Mexican government, to produce more fentanyl, and then pump it into our country when we have the ability to shut down the pipeline here, or at least curtail it greatly.
The government is aware and has chosen to allow this to sort of just sit in the vault.
There are a few career people that are still in that know about Project Thor. Some of those people are pushing it, some of those people are not, but the blueprint is there. Somebody just has to dust it off and go, okay, this is what we're gonna do.
And you have hope that work can live on.
Absolutely. And there's people suffering because we're not solving our own problem of letting those guns go. Do we have the power and the might and the capability to do that? No doubt. So let's do it.
Up next.
The Sinaloa cartel supplies most of the fentanyl in the U.S.
If the U.S. stopped buying drugs, what would happen to the cartel?
Our country is being invaded. This is a war.
Drugs are killing tens of thousands of Americans every year.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb. Every life lost to fentanyl is a tragedy.
Every one of those pills is an unregulated pharmaceutical that can snuff out your life like that. You're playing Russian roulette.
As Mexican cartels flood the country with illegal painkillers.
The Sinaloa cartel supplies most of the fentanyl in the U.S. and is largely responsible for more than 100,000 overdose deaths in 2021 alone.
This is not like cocaine or heroin. This is a synthetic.
People in the United States say, oh, these drugs are all coming from Mexico, but it's only part of the story.
CBS reports journeys to a cartel stronghold.
They're probably checking us out, if they haven't already.
It is said that all the names of the passengers landing in Culiacan, the cartel know who they are.
To uncover why the U.S. government is failing to stop them.
What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
Ashley was a different kid. She was beautiful and smart and funny and social. She was a mom. She has a beautiful son. She was a free spirit. She was just an amazing human. She's not with us anymore.
What happened?
On May 23rd of 2021, she purchased 4 tablets from a lifetime drug dealer. And then she was poisoned to death by half a tablet of what she thought was Percocet, but contained 5 milligrams of fentanyl. 1/2 of 1 tablet. A lot of the PSAs say one pill can kill, but it was actually one half of the pill that killed her. The grief of losing a child is immense. It's like strangles you. You can't breathe.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's really important because this is unlike the drugs that we saw anytime before.
No, I don't think you ever recover from a loss of a child. I don't think you do. I just think you learn to live with it. But you don't heal from it. Instead, you fight. My government's going to do something. I believe that with all my heart.
Fentanyl was designed as a miracle painkiller, especially to help cancer patients. But over the past decade, illicitly produced fentanyl became the most commonly abused drug in America and the world's deadliest opioid. Knockoffs supercharged an epidemic and renewed a rallying cry for the U.S. war on drugs.
The Sinaloa Cartel supplies most of the fentanyl in the U.S.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
Plaguing communities and destroying lives from coast to coast. The most common cause of poisoning deaths of children.
One of the most pressing national security and public health challenges, costing the nation an estimated $1 trillion a year.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb. Every life lost to fentanyl is a tragedy.
This port of entry sees more fentanyl than any other port of entry in the U.S. In fact, over half of it is interdicted here. And the problem just keeps growing and growing and growing. In the first 6 months of 2023, officers have seized more fentanyl than they had in the last 5 years combined.
You see a lot of 200,000 pill loads. We've seen all the way up to 1.6 million pills in a load.
The numbers are so astronomical.
Every one of those pills is an unregulated pharmaceutical that can snuff out your life like that. So that's 200,000 bullets in a gun. You're playing Russian roulette. Every time you take one of these pills, it's being made in a warehouse someplace in Mexico.
I was ambassador to Mexico from 2019 to 2021.
Tell me about the U.S. and its war on the cartels, war on drugs.
We've been trying to eradicate drugs and get that issue under control for 50 years, and frankly have not been very successful. I think the problem has gotten worse. We're facing really a new kind of problem. So I'm particularly concerned about what that means for where we go from here.
In 2023, the White House announced a crackdown against illicit fentanyl supply chains. President Biden asked Congress for more than $46 billion to do it.
So let's launch a major surge to stop fentanyl production and the sale and trafficking with more drug detection machines, inspection cargo, stop pills and powder at the border.
Troy Miller is in charge of America's border agency.
I think CBP is well positioned to lead the government in our counter fentanyl efforts. This last year, we had an operation called Blue Lotus where we surged resources to California and Arizona, and we seized 10,000 pounds of fentanyl in 2 months.
Operations are temporary. Do you have the resources and the commitment from the federal government to really tackle this in a way that will have a measurable impact?
It is one of our top priorities. Do we need additional resources to continue to do what we're doing? Yes, this is not like cocaine or heroin. This is a synthetic, so it's very difficult to estimate what we're catching and what we're not. Seizures don't necessarily mean anything other than we're seizing more drugs. We're going to continue to figure out ways to affect the supply chain.
Aren't these strategies, though, the same strategies that we've employed for decades now? What's different?
I think our partnerships are better than ever. We're never going to stop narcotics completely, but I believe that we can have an effect on fentanyl and the folks that are smuggling fentanyl.
Officials concede that seizing drugs is only one step in curbing the power of the cartels. To find out how cartels maintain the upper hand in this battle, we have to go beyond the border.
This is Sinaloa cartel territory.
Absolutely.
You've dealt with them many, many years now.
Yes. They know me, I know them.
Miguel Angel Vega is a journalist born and raised in the heart of narco territory. We hired him to show us a side of this cartel stronghold that only locals usually get to see. This is Culiacan, home base for the Sinaloa cartel, fortified by a vast surveillance network.
Roughly how many people are we talking about?
We're talking at least 2,000 people.
Wow. In the city?
All over the city. All over the city. Not to mention the sicarios, the gunmen.
They're probably checking us out, if they haven't already.
It is said that all the names of the passengers landing in Culiacan, the cartel, you know who they are. Still, there is a sense of fear that might be an undercover officer, DA, landing in Culiacan. You can make a phone call, they give you tracking your entire conversation. They have drones, they have technology, they can corrupt all this surveillance in the city.
The cartels have access to some of the most sophisticated spyware technology in the world. They have used it to launch targeted counteroffensives against anyone trying to investigate them.
So any electronic communication, we should assume that we're being monitored.
Very likely.
Yeah.
You never see them, but they see you.
That was just a sort of a performance and an homage to Jesus Malverde, who is a sort of a folkloric figure. He is sort of known as the Robin Hood for drug traffickers. People come to this shrine to pay homage, to leave their US dollar blessings. This is evidence of just how revered Jesus Malverde is here.
The cartel is so deeply entrenched here that narcos are practically indistinguishable from locals who act as important allies.
Okay, you're gonna see all these baseball caps with, images or figures related to the narcos. Chapo here. You see the initials of Joaquin Guzman Loera. You see all the drug lords.
Locally, these guys they're revered.
They're like heroes.
Heroes.
When I was like 12 years old and I used to speak with my classmates, like, what do you want to be when you grow older? And we used to tell narco. They don't want to be the next Michael Jordan. They want to be the next Chapo.
Despite being one of the world's biggest economies, Mexico consistently underperforms, according to the World Bank. More than 40% of the population lives below the poverty line.
Let's say the idea that Americans would want to wipe out cartels would not sit well with people here.
It's not like they're going to fight for them, but if they can, they will protect these narcos.
But these cartels are also responsible for untold violence and death.
The way the people say it here is they don't mess with us, so we're fine.
Narcos commit the vast majority of murders across Mexico and are notorious for their particularly gruesome killing tactics.
They're criminals, and we know that sooner or later they will have to pay.
Vega says it's not just in life that cartel members are revered, that around here, even in death, their influence and status casts a long shadow.
Miguel Angel Vega. This is Cementerio Jardines de Lumaya, Jardines de Lumaya Cemetery, and you're gonna see some massive tombs.
Vega says this is the opulent final resting place of former drug lords and their loved ones.
This is like 5-story building, and it is actually a tomb. This is a replica of the Taj Mahal.
Wow. I don't think I've ever seen a cemetery quite like this.
Like this one right here. This could be like a little condo.
These are house sizes.
There are no inscriptions whatsoever, no dates, no names, nothing. I spoke to one of the architects and he was telling me like this tomb, for example, $500,000, American dollars. Because it's Florentine marble. They have AC and TV and a kitchen also.
This is insane. Swear that you were driving through a residential neighborhood.
U.S. Southern Command estimates that transnational criminal organizations make $310 billion a year, and disrupting that money flow is a critical part of the Biden administration's drug control strategy. They do that largely by monitoring electronic transactions, but drug deals are conducted mostly with cash. If cartels took that money to a bank, the government could trace it to specific people and arrest them. To avoid that, they turn to streets like this, where they can exchange dollars for pesos off the books.
What are we looking at here?
You see all these umbrellas?
Yeah.
These women are dollars exchangers.
Uh-huh.
So you're gonna see a whole bunch of this.
Wow.
Like maybe 300. I'm gonna ask, what's the rate? I'm gonna just stop.
Yeah. Oh, here's two young women here.
¿Cómo está el cambio?
17.5.
17.5 lo compras.
Ay, no me se nada más.
But every now and then, like, someone comes along with $500,000. $500,000. And they go like, I want to exchange this.
So money laundering is like coursing through the city.
And the government knows this. Every single person in this city, we all know that.
According to the U.S. Defense Department, Mexico's drug cartels control more than a third of the entire country. In 2019, Mexico's president created a new militarized police force that he called the National Guard. But frequently, their firepower is outmatched by the cartels, who are armed with an arsenal of weapons that they smuggle in from the U.S.
The U.S. government is aware that these criminal organizations are armed up with weaponry coming from the U.S., one of their main sources of power. How is it that more isn't being done?
That was one of the conclusions that I came to very quickly after arriving in Mexico as ambassador, that we could and should be making a priority in this. This is not DEA's issue. As ambassador, I tried to shift the focus to this issue. I asked the Justice Department to brief me on what was being done in our country to try to curb this flow of weapons. We talk about these Mexican criminal organizations and how bad they are, but we have responsibility from the United States for arming them.
In June of 2023, the Biden administration announced it was making it a new priority to stop cartels from smuggling firearms out of the country. And senior justice officials acknowledged that the U.S. is the source of the lion's share of guns trafficked into Mexico. People question whether police and the armed forces are really there to protect the population. For decades, Mexican law enforcement has been linked to human rights abuses, including forced disappearances, torture, and extrajudicial killings, including that of 5 unarmed civilians caught on video in the spring of 2023.
The government violated human rights. That for sure, that happened. And not so long time ago. Corruption in Mexico has affected every single part of its institutions, not only at the federal level, but state and local levels as well. And we are fighting corruption very seriously.
The cartel has deep, deep roots within the country that makes it so appealing for so many people.
Thankfully, we are investing a lot of resources on small and medium-sized communities, because this is where the problem has developed.
And by the way, in a lot of those communities, people actually like the cartels more than they like the government.
Well, I mean, I know where you're coming from. That's
and we heard that for ourselves.
I have. I do not think that that's the case. There was a big problem, that's for sure, and you are right. We need to acknowledge that. We do not acknowledge we had that problem, then we cannot move forward. Still a long way ahead, but we are in the right direction.
You gotta take this call. Sí, te escucho.
Drug cartels are not completely underground here. They function more like a shadow government and can be reached with the right connections.
Okay, no te preocupes. Okay.
What's the latest?
This man is gonna talk to us.
Who is this?
This is a major player inside the Sinaloa cartel. It's not just anybody. He's way high. Way high. When I say way high, it's someone who travels to China, goes to South America, he goes to Europe.
Everywhere the Sinaloa cartel has its tentacles.
Yes. He's one of the decision makers.
What do you know of this location?
Usually that's where they dump the bodies, the executions, they dump bodies in this neighborhood. So, yeah, I know.
You ready?
Yes, I am.
Tell me when we need to turn off the cameras.
Yeah, I think by now you should put the cameras down.
1.5 kilometers. Turn right.
All right, here we go. What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
Yo en la cartera de Sinaloa tengo una función de comandante. Soy el número 23.
This man wouldn't reveal his identity as a condition of speaking publicly about Sinaloa's criminal operations. He said he's been a narco for 30 years.
You're taking a risk by allowing us to come meet with you here.
Sí, señor, demasiado. Yo puedo perder en este momento de mi libertad mensualmente hasta $1 million.
He told us that while the U.S. government has been fighting a drug war, American citizens have been funding and arming the cartels.
How fast can you get a weapon of war from the U.S. here to Sinaloa?
En un día puede llegar.
In a day?
Todos los días agarran muchas armas y todos los días pasan muchas armas.
The drug money buys more guns for you.
Sí.
If the U.S. stopped buying drugs, what would happen to the cartel?
El dinero se acaba.
The U.S. government calls the Sinaloa cartel one of the most dangerous narco-terrorist organizations in the world. So are you a terrorist group?
Pues yo opino que no. Porque ellos lo piden. Entonces, ¿quién es el terrorista? Yo no soy asesino. Yo soy comerciante.
He acknowledged the U.S.-led crackdown and said they were putting some parts of their fentanyl supply chain on pause, but considered it a temporary setback.
Entonces, en estos momentos estamos pasando pues, una etapa crítica. Se está controlando todo esto.
And how quickly do you think that things will return to normal?
Algunos 3 meses, pero pues nunca se acaba.
Culiacan is just one city. In regions all across Mexico, narcos are still producing fentanyl and smuggling record shipments into the U.S. U.S. intelligence estimates that cartels are actually trafficking 4 times the amount law enforcement seizes at the border.
We're not going to interdict our way out of this problem.
We are fueling the cartel's ability to run this trade.
It's just a vicious cycle that continues.
People in the United States say, oh, these drugs are all coming from Mexico. Mexico's got to fix this problem, which is certainly a legitimate point, but it's only part of the story, right? Because another part of the story is the money, the guns.
Nothing we're doing is changing, yet the problem is only growing.
That is correct.
Every passing year.
That is correct. And I do not see, to this day, any kind of recognition by the U.S. government that this is something that requires new thinking. And I think it's a failure of imagination, frankly, on our part.
We are facing a crisis the likes of which we have never seen before. We have been waging a drug war for many, many decades. It's not gotten better, it's only gotten worse. Where's the long-term win here?
Ultimately, success is going to be less deaths of American people.
Our country is being invaded. Maybe not by soldiers, maybe not by bombs, but it's being invaded by drugs. We are arming them while our citizens are dying. This is a war, but we're not fighting it. We're being killed.